First there's a question. Where does your mind come back to roost? There's several little anecdotes of Mullah Nasruddin. There was that time when Mullah Nasruddin was having mental problems and he was directed to a psychiatrist. Now at the psychiatrist's office, the psychiatrist took out those whiteboards that have got those ink dots on them. So he held up a whiteboard with an ink dot on it and he said to the mullah, Mullah, tell me, what does this remind you of? And the mullah said, oh, that's an elephant. So the psychiatrist held up another board and the same question, and Mullah Nasruddin said, oh, that's a giraffe. And so it went on, that's a tiger, that's a monkey, that's a cheetah. And after some time, the psychiatrist shook his head and he said to the mullah, Mullah, you have a serious problem. You have a fixation with animals. The mullah said, what? Me with the problem? You're the one with the menagerie. And then the mullah was walking along the road on one of those pilgrimages that he went on from time to time. And he met a priest and a rabbi on the road, and they got into an amicable conversation about spiritual things, and as they progressed, the day went on, and they were all very hungry, but they were all, as usual with this, they were penurious, but they put their few copper coins together, and they went into town and they bought some halwa, that lovely sweet meat, but when they brought it back where they were going to rest for the evening, there was debate about, how they were going to divide the halwa. And so it was decided amongst them that whoever had the most significant dream would have the halwa in the morning. So the night passed, and in the morning it was the turn of the rabbi to describe what his dream had been, and the rabbi said, well, I found myself in this beautiful garden, and there were a number of the great prophets, and I was able to sit down with them and debate and have wonderful knowledge that we exchanged. And then it was the priest's turn, and he said, well, I dreamt that I had died and I'd gone up to heaven, and I was at the pearly gates, and St. Peter said to me, because of the good works you've done all your life, the pearly gates are open and in you go. And then it was the mullah's turn, and the mullah said, well, in the middle of the night, a great booming voice woke me up, and it said, eat the halwa. So I did. And then there was penis and testicles. And they'd been together from the earliest days. They were very close. And they did almost everything together. But most of all, they loved to go fishing. They used to go down by the river where the little mud scuppers are around in the mud under the edge of the river. And they were such tasty little characters, little creatures they were. So one day, Penis and Testicles were down there fishing, and they had quite a good catch. And they were on their way home when they happened to meet Vagina, who had been down by the river washing her clothes. Well, of course, they exchanged pleasantries, and Vagina asked Penis and Testicles what they'd been doing, and they said that they'd been fishing, and Vagina said, oh, I love those little mud scuppers, I'd love to smoke them and dry them and share them with my friends. Would you have any to spare? Well, Penis was very happy to share some of his mudscuppers, but Testicles was not at all pleased about wanting to share his catch. So he lied. He said, no, we didn't have a good day fishing at all. We only caught a few and we haven't got enough to share. But in any event, Penis was happy to share what he had, and Vagina went off very happy. But you know, another little part of the story is that of course, there were seasons. And as we well know, there's a time for reaping and there's a time for sowing. And there's a time in between. So it happened to be one of those in-between times, and Penis and Testicle decided that they'd go and visit their uncle in a nearby town. So they went off during this period between the sowing and the reaping, and they had a good time. They found their family there, and their uncle was in good form, and the time passed, but it was time for them to go back and sow their seeds. But it was a drought season. Things were very dry, and there was a long space between villages where they could get a drink and sustenance. So both Penis and Testicles were very thirsty, and on their way back during that dry period, they happened to come across Vagina again, who was just on her way back from carrying a pitcher of water from the stream, which allowed, of course, Penis and Testicle to ask for a drink from her, which she willingly gave. But because Testicles had not been very forthcoming with his fish, when they shared that water, he was kind of left on the outside, only getting a few drops. And, you know, Penis and Testicles would quite often meet a Vagina at other times in the future, and, you know, Penis and Vagina would come together very amicably, but Testicles always seemed to find himself he learned a very great lesson from this. And one could ask you what that lesson was. But the question really that was asked was, where does your mind come back to roost? This is a very serious question. Because we do know that with our experiences of life, we will always bring it back to some point, some roost, some place of rest, be it positive or be it negative. For many, it's a negative. Oh, that wasn't a good experience, because after all, you know, I'm a failure, nothing works for me. Or if you're one of those light workers, you preen yourself and say, oh, well, you know, I've done another good job. You know what I'm talking about. But we need to ask ourselves that question. Where does our mind come back to roost after any experience? Be it positive or negative. And the realization that this roost is always made of some conditioning, some mindset that we've grasped. Where does your mind come back to roost? But you can also answer the question about penis and testicles if you like.
Well, I think it's more about being fairly neutral about who you're connecting with and what you're doing, because sometimes you're going to be on the outer, sometimes you're going to be on the inner. It just depends what group you're connecting with. And it's just going to be, you're going to have a combination of both. So just observe and see what happens and see how you want things to be.